Right, let's talk about something that sounds incredibly boring but is, in fact, terrifyingly important: soybeans. Yes, those little green beans that eventually become your tofu, your soy milk, and the food for the animals that become your bacon. And for years, America sold a truly staggering amount of them to China. It was a beautiful, if slightly odd, relationship. We grew the beans, they bought the beans. Simple. But recently that simple transaction became the front line of a massive global power struggle. It's a conflict that isn't being fought with tanks or fighter jets, but with shipping manifests and tariffs. This isn't just about beans. It's about who gets to write the rules for the 21st century. Think of the America-China trade relationship like one of those celebrity couples you know is doomed from the start. For a while it was all smiles for the cameras. America got cheap electronics and novelty oversized coffee mugs, and China got to rapidly build its economy into a global powerhouse. Everyone seemed happy, but underneath the surface, resentments were brewing. America started feeling like it was getting the short end of the stick. Like it was the one always paying for dinner while China just happened to forget its wallet every single time. And China, for its part, was getting tired of being treated like the junior partner when it was very clearly becoming a co-star of the whole show. This whole saga isn't just a dry economic dispute you can ignore. To understand why China might suddenly turn its nose up at a boatload of perfectly good beans, you need to understand the backstory. For decades, the United States has been grumbling about China's trade practices. And let's be clear, some of the complaints were pretty legitimate. We're talking about accusations of intellectual property theft, where an American company designs a cool new gadget, and a few months later, a suspiciously similar and much cheaper version appears on the Chinese market. It's like showing your friend your secret recipe for chili, only for them to open a rival chili restaurant across the street using your exact recipe, but calling it totally original spicy meat soup. The list of grievances goes on. There were claims of forced technology transfer, where American companies wanting to do business in China were allegedly pressured to hand over their trade secrets as a kind of entry fee. Imagine being told you can only open your lemonade stand in a new neighborhood if you first teach the local mob boss how to make your signature lemonade. Then there was the issue of currency manipulation, where the US accused China of keeping its currency artificially low to make its exports cheaper and more attractive. It's a bit like a race where one runner is allowed to start halfway to the finish line. For a long time the American response was a lot of finger-wagging and strongly worded letters. A succession of presidents complained, negotiated, and ultimately largely accepted the status quo because the economic relationship was just too intertwined and profitable to seriously disrupt. The supply chains were a tangled mess of interdependence. An iPhone might be designed in California, its components coming from half a dozen countries, and then assembled in China. Disrupting that was like trying to unscramble an egg. Messy and ultimately pointless. The global economy was hooked on this arrangement. But then, the political winds shifted. The grumbling in Washington turned into a roar. The argument was no longer just about economics, it became about national pride and security. The feeling grew that America was being played for a fool, that its manufacturing base was being hollowed out, and that China was using the proceeds to build up its military and challenge American dominance on the world stage. The era of polite disagreement was over. So in response to these long simmering grievances, the US government decided to stop writing letters and start taking action. And its weapon of choice was tariffs. A tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. The idea is simple. If you make Chinese products more expensive, American consumers will buy American-made alternatives. It's the economic equivalent of putting a kick-me sign on every product that says made in China. The US slapped tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, electronics, industrial machinery, hoping to force Beijing to change its ways. Naturally, China did not take this lying down. It responded with its own set of tariffs, and it chose its targets very, very carefully. China went straight for the political jugular. It targeted goods from states politically important to American leadership. At the very top of that list, agricultural products. Specifically, soybeans. This was a calculated move. American farmers, particularly in the Midwest, represent a powerful political bloc. They had become heavily dependent on the Chinese market. Suddenly, American soybean farmers were in a world of hurt. Before the trade war, China bought about 60% of US soybean exports. That market vanished almost overnight. Chinese buyers simply stopped buying. This brings us to the main event, the soybean rejection. Earlier this year, a massive cargo ship carrying tens of thousands of tons of soybeans from Argentina arrived at a port in China. But instead of being unloaded, it was turned away. Chinese customs officials declared the shipment contaminated. On the surface, this might seem like a simple quality control issue. It happens. But everyone in the industry knew the real story. These weren't just any Argentinian soybeans. The suspicion, actually American soybeans, rerouted through Argentina to dodge tariffs. This practice, transshipment, is like putting on a fake mustache and glasses to sneak into a party you were kicked out of. US sellers, desperate, sell mountains of unwanted beans to a middleman in Argentina. The middleman repackages them, slaps a Made in Argentina label on the bag, and tries to sell them to China as local produce. It's a risky game, but with billions of dollars on the line, people were willing to play. For a while it might have even worked. But China is not stupid. Its inspectors knew exactly what to look for. They have sophisticated methods to test the origin of agricultural products. So when they discovered this contaminated shipment, they weren't just rejecting a boatload of beans, they were sending a message, loud and clear. The immediate aftermath of the soybean rejection was exactly as dramatic as China intended. The news sent shockwaves through global commodity markets. Soybean futures, basically bets on future prices, took a nosedive. For American farmers already on the ropes, this was another punch to the gut. Any glimmer of hope to offload surplus inventory even through sneaky back channels was extinguished. Crop prices fell even further, pushing many closer to bankruptcy. For China, the move was a calculated risk. Rejecting a massive shipment meant they had to find beans somewhere else. That put pressure on domestic supply chains. China needs a colossal amount of soybeans, primarily to feed its massive pig population, the source of pork, a dietary staple. Disruption could mean higher food prices at home, but Beijing decided the political statement was worth short-term pain. They gambled that other suppliers could fill the gap fast enough. The political fallout in the US was intense. The incident poured fuel on the trade debate. The event hardened positions on both sides. Compromise felt further away. When the world's biggest buyer of soybeans suddenly boycotts the world's biggest producer, it doesn't just affect those two countries. It creates a massive vacuum in the global market, a frantic scramble to fill it, with American soybeans off the table. China had to look elsewhere, and fast. The most obvious beneficiaries were other major soybean-producing nations. Brazil, Argentina, China was knocking on their door, desperate to buy every last bean, willing to pay top dollar for countries like Brazil. This was a golden opportunity. Farmers ramped up production, clearing more land to plant more soy. Exports to China skyrocketed, massive influx of cash into their economies. But the boom had a cost-increased demand linked to accelerated Amazon deforestation, a global environmental catastrophe, a trade dispute in Washington, D.C. contributing to destruction thousands of miles away. A stark reminder, no action happens in a vacuum. The global map of the soybean trade was redrawn in real time. Ships were being rerouted, new contracts were being signed, old relationships were being severed. This reshuffling highlights a key feature of the modern economy: supply chains are fragile. For decades, the system favored efficiency and predictability. A bean grown in Iowa could be shipped to a pig farm in China on a predictable schedule and price. The trade war threw a giant wrench into that machine. It introduced uncertainty and risk, forcing a rethink of dependencies. So, why should you, a person who probably doesn't think about soybeans from one day to the next, care about any of this? The answer is simple. It affects the price of your food. Soybeans are a foundational commodity. They are not just for vegans and vegetarians. The vast majority of the world's soy crop is used for animal feed: chicken, pork, beef. When the price and availability of that feed are disrupted, the cost of raising those animals goes up. And guess who ultimately pays that higher cost? You do, at the checkout counter. The trade war acts like a hidden tax on your grocery bill. Initially, the tariffs themselves made many Chinese goods more expensive, but the secondary effects, like the disruption to the agricultural market, have wider and more unpredictable consequences. For China, cutting off the supply of cheap American soybeans meant they had to pay more for beans from Brazil. That higher cost for animal feed eventually translates into higher pork prices for Chinese families. This can lead to food inflation, a major source of public discontent that the Chinese government works very hard to avoid. It's a political headache born from a trade showdown. On the American side, while soybean prices crashed for farmers, the prices of other goods went up. Think about the tariffs placed on Chinese steel and aluminum, cars, washing machines, beer cans. When those materials become more expensive for American manufacturers, they pass that cost on to consumers. So, while the trade war was supposedly designed to protect American industry, it often ended up making life more expensive for ordinary American families. It's a classic case of the cure being potentially worse than the disease. Ultimately, this is the real-world impact of high-level geopolitics. Decisions made in ornate government buildings in Washington and Beijing have a direct and tangible effect on household budgets around the world. It's a force that can determine whether a family in Shanghai can afford pork for dinner, or whether a family in Ohio has to pay more for a new refrigerator. The Great Soybean Standoff is a perfect example of how interconnected our world is, and how easily a political dispute can find its way to your dinner table. So there you have it. The seemingly simple story of a rejected soybean shipment is in fact a story about everything. It's a story about the changing balance of global power, the fragility of our economic systems, the real-world consequences of political decisions. It shows how a farmer in Nebraska, a tech worker in Shenzhen, a politician in Washington, a family in Sao Paulo, all connected by a complex web of trade, politics, and yes, beans. The trade war has moved way beyond a simple squabble. It has become the defining geopolitical contest of our time. The soybean rejection was a masterclass in political messaging. With one simple act, China demonstrated its power. It punished its rival. It sent a chilling warning to the rest of the world. A stark reminder. In this new era of great power competition, food can be weaponized, supply chains can be held hostage, economic interdependence can be vulnerability as well as strength. What the future holds is anyone's guess. The question of what happens next affects every single one of us. So maybe keep an eye on the price of tofu. It might be the best barometer we have for the health of the planet.